Welcome into mock draft 1.5 with trades. My second to final mock draft. I will have a final one tomorrow that I plan on doing in a video as well. However, I'm planning on doing a lot in the next 24 hours. Here's what I got planned. After this video, I plan on dropping an episode of Blazers Pulse, an off-season preview edition. I've already made the graphics for that, just gotta record it. And then tomorrow, I want to do a couple of videos. One is my final mock draft without trades. And then the other video I want to do is why this draft is so important for the Blazers, just a scripted video. And if there's a big juicy rumor or something in the morning, I might slap together a video on that as well. Also, we'll be going live tonight on our second channel, Blazers Uprise Live. Going live around 9:45 Pacific time, so you don't want to miss that. And the biggest thing of all, of course, is our NBA draft live stream. We'll be live streaming the draft, every single pick, talking about every team, but of course focusing on the Blazers, starting live at 4 p.m. Pacific time tomorrow is the plan right now. We're going to have a awesome graphics package for that. I'm really proud of the work I've put together on that. I still got to do a little bit in regards to tying everything together, so hopefully I'm able to get some sleep tonight. We will see. And also, this mock draft is brought to you by Manta Mask. Use the promo code Uprise for a 10% discount over at mantasleep.com. They are the #1 sleep mask brand out there. Extremely comfortable masks. I've tried it for myself. I'm gonna definitely wear one tonight as I try and get enough sleep, or at least good enough sleep, in order to be ready to go for that big live stream tomorrow. And if you want to be productive, if you want to be your best self, that starts with a great night's sleep, and Manta Sleep has you covered. They have a sound mask that you can listen to audio in, Bluetooth headphones built into it, or they just have a silk mask, which is really comfortable, I've heard, as well as their basic pro mask, which is what I got. And trust me, it's comfortable. So check them out, link in the description box below. Thank you to them for sponsoring this video. With the first overall pick, we already know what it's going to be. It's going to be Victor Wembanyama for the San Antonio Spurs. I've talked enough about him on this channel. We all should know what he is. If you don't know what he is, look him up. With the second overall pick, the Charlotte Hornets select Brandon Miller, the forward out of Alabama. It was rumored that the Hornets were leaning towards Brandon Miller for fit reasons about a week ago, and then in recent days, it transitioned to, oh, they're actually liking Scoot Henderson. Scoot Henderson had a better first workout than Brandon Miller, so it looks like the Hornets are going to take him. But recently, a lot of reputable reporters have gone back to Brandon Miller being the presumed #2 pick to the Charlotte Hornets, as he went and had a second workout with the Hornets and looked much better. Of course, he's coming off mono, so he's lost a little bit of weight, isn't in the best shape, so that could explain why his first workout maybe wasn't the best. But I think this is good news for the team that's next, the Portland Trail Blazers, because if Brandon Miller goes to, Portland will have hopefully their choice of trades with a third overall pick, or in my opinion, the second best prospect on the board in Scoot Henderson. Charlotte goes with Brandon Miller at 2. And we have a trade for the #3 overall pick as the Blazers trade it for Zion Williamson, Devin Vassell in the 14th pick. The Pelicans trade Zion as well as 14 for the 3rd pick and Doug McDermott, who's a shooter off the bench. This has been rumored. It's rumored that Zion Williamson won't be a New Orleans Pelican, at least according to Bill Simmons, after the draft on Thursday. And it's rumored that the Pelicans want Scoot Henderson and therefore could potentially trade for the #3 pick. And then I threw the Spurs in here because I don't think both Simons and the 3rd pick would make sense to go to the Pelicans because they already have CJ McCollum there in the backcourt, and both Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson are guards. So without a CJ McCollum trade, I think it might make more sense for Anthony Simons to get flipped to a 3rd team, especially if Portland can get some sort of value out of that, because I think Simons in 3 is much more valuable than Zion Williamson, given his injury problems and lack of availability and problems with his teammates, and just there's a lot of red flags with Zion Williamson. So Anthony Simons gets sent to the Spurs for Vassell and McDermott. The Spurs potentially looking for a star lead guard to pair next to Victor Wembanyama, and they get that with Simons. Trading away a wing, they have some solid wings there. Keldon Johnson is one of them. And the Blazers get back Vassell that they can absorb into a TPE, and maybe Vassell would start as the starting shooting guard next to Jeremy Grant, Zion Williamson, Yusuf Nurkic, and Damian Lillard, or he could potentially come off the bench as a solid two-way option who scored almost 20 points per game last year. A big deal for the Pelicans in this as well is they save $20 million as the Blazers barely match and the Spurs barely match, and the Pelicans reap the savings, which helps them do this deal. And with the 3rd overall pick, the New Orleans Pelicans select Scoot Henderson. No surprise there. That's why they made this trade. Let's move on to number 4. With the 4th overall pick, the Houston Rockets select Amen Thompson, who I have 3rd on my big board ahead of Brandon Miller. I think Amen's going to be a star. If he can figure out how to shoot, he has a chance at being the best player from this draft, and I know that's saying a ton, but everything else jumps off the page to me. His athleticism, his change of pace, his ball handling ability, his passing is phenomenal, really creative with some of his passes as well. Footwork is good. Defensively, I think he can be a really good player as well. Amen Thompson to 4 makes some sense. There's some weird fit questions next to like a Kevin Porter Jr., but there are rumors that the Rockets might look to trade him, and I would, because I think Amen Thompson is a much better version of kind of that point forward type of role. I love Amen Thompson here at 4 to the Rockets for value reasons. At 5, the Detroit Pistons select Jarris Walker, the power forward out of Houston. I had Cam Whitmore here in my last draft, but it seems like Jarris Walker is becoming the favorite to go here at 5, and I like his fit next to Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Duren. He's just a really physical presence at the power forward spot. Can probably space the floor for those guys, assuming his shooting gets a little bit better. He's already an okay shooter as of now. And defensively brings an edge to that team that I think they lack, and I think that they desperately need. I love Jarris Walker 5 to Detroit. I think he's a great fit there next to their core. At 6, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Ausar Thompson, brother of Amen, also from Overtime Elite. And Ausar's a little intriguing as a fit next to two kind of point forward-ish types of forwards with Franz Wagner. Paulo Banchero's a little bit more of a point than Wagner is, but both those guys can handle the ball, make plays, score off the dribble, and you're basically just adding another one of those guys in Ausar. Ausar is a better off-ball player than Amen, a little better shooter, and that's why I actually like Ausar's fit a little bit more to Orlando than Amen potentially, and I think if Ausar is here, he's going to be the best player on the board. He's 5th on my big board, and I like him here to Orlando. At 7, the Indiana Pacers select Taylor Hendricks, the power forward out of Central Florida. And I think if Indiana stays at this pick, which I think there's a sneaky chance that they may trade it potentially down or just trade it for a OG Anunoby or something like that, because the Pacers were competitive last year when Tyrese Halliburton played. They tanked the end of the year, but they were surprisingly solid. So it'll be interesting to see the direction they go in. But if the Pacers make this pick, I expect it to be one of Jarris Walker or Taylor Hendricks, because the Indiana Pacers need a starting power forward next to Miles Turner. And Taylor Hendricks is going to be that guy. He's going to be the floor spacing 4-man that can protect the rim a little bit that the Pacers need. I do like Jarris Walker a little better for them because I think the Pacers need additional physicality. I think they lack in physicality and they struggle on the boards because of it. And Jarris Walker, being the more physical power forward, I think is the better option for the Pacers. But Taylor Hendricks is a solid pick here at 7. At 8, the Washington Wizards select Anthony Black out of Arkansas, and this has been the point guard that seems to have become consensus for the Wizards to take. I think it's no surprise that they're going to take a point guard. I think everybody expected the Wizards to take a point guard even before trading Bradley Beal, but even now, although I guess they could use a shooting guard or maybe a starting small forward, the point guard position has just been an area of lack for the Wizards for a while. And getting Anthony Black, who can play some point, play some 2, play some 3, is just a versatile piece that makes it easy to kind of mix and match future moves around him. Really smart player, really good defensive piece as well. I like Anthony Black at 8 to Washington. At 9, we have our second trade. And this is a 4-team trade. The Jazz are trading up from 16 and 28 to 10, so they'll have the 9th and the 10th picks. But in this trade, DeAndre Ayton goes from the Mavericks. They move down from 10 to 16 to get him. They also trade away Maxi Kleber and Tim Hardaway Jr. to the Suns to give the Suns more depth. As part of this trade, the Wizards are trading Monte Morris and DeLon Wright also to the Suns and getting back the 28th pick from the Jazz. The Mavericks part of this deal is just moving down to get a legitimate big man, which I think they need. And I think if they're looking to go for DeAndre Ayton, I think they need to get a first-round pick back later on in the first round, because I don't think 10 straight up for Ayton is a fair deal, even if the Mavericks get off the contract of Davis Bertans. The Jazz side of things, they just move up. We'll see who they take at 10. The Wizards basically shed $17 million of salary in Morris and Wright, and get back a late first-round pick because of it. With the Wizards rebuilding and potentially looking to take on salary in order to get draft capital that way, being able to get a first-round pick as well as clear up some of that cap space to do that makes a ton of sense. And then for the Suns side of things, they have a void at the point guard position with Chris Paul gone. Cam Payne hasn't really been a reliable backup. He's injured often. And they get back two solid point guards to basically just round out that position with Monte Morris and DeLon Wright. I like both those guys' fits next to the core three of Beal, Booker, and Kevin Durant. And then Maxi Kleber can be some front court depth. Tim Hardaway Jr., a scorer off the bench. The Suns all of a sudden would be looking a lot more deep. And I think this would be a good move for all teams involved. This trade would work without the Wizards, though. You could have something that potentially looks like this. Same logic for the Jazz, same logic for the Mavericks. The Suns get back three role players in Bullock, Kleber, and Hardaway Jr. Again, trading DeAndre Ayton for multiple role players for depth reasons. Now, with the 2 picks for the Jazz, at 9, I have them taking Cam Whitmore, who seems like he could be falling down draft boards, and this is just an upside swing here. It makes a ton of sense for the Jazz to take at 9. I don't think there's any chance Cam Whitmore falls beyond this, and he could slot in as the 2 or maybe the 3 and would be given a starting role right away in Utah as they rebuild. At 10, I have the Jazz taking Bilal Coulibaly, who has risen up draft boards and seems like the type of high upside two-way forward that the Jazz could potentially look to trade up from 16 and 28 to get, because the Jazz just need upside. They need guys that can pop, and I think both Whitmore and Coulibaly are 2 guys that could become future all-stars. The measurements on both are good. The physical tools are good. Coulibaly measured in at like 6'7" with over a 7-foot wingspan and has played really well down the stretch in his season overseas, playing next to Victor Wembanyama. With the 11th pick, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Grady Dick. Shooter makes sense next to Asar Thompson, Paulo Banchero, Franz Wagner. Just a perfect role there for Grady Dick in Orlando, and just a really solid fit. I have him lower on my big board, but I don't mind the pick at 11 for Orlando, getting a guy with some size that can shoot the ball the way that Grady Dick does. And then at 12, we have a trade. I'm not going to put it on the screen. The Oklahoma City Thunder are trading 12 down to the Brooklyn Nets for the 21st and 22nd picks, as well as a future protected first-round pick via the Phoenix Suns in 2027. So Brooklyn is on the clock here at 12, and they're selecting Kobe Buffkin to be their point guard of the future next to Mikal Bridges and Nick Claxton. I really like Kobe Buffkin. I have a top 10 grade on him. Great finisher, solid defensive player, good at a lot of things. Not going to wow you in any one area other than his finishing, but I like his 3-level scoring ability, the size to play the point or the shooting guard position, the ability to play both positions offensively and defensively, and I think Kobe Buffkin would make a lot of sense for the Nets to try and trade up and get. At 13, I have the Toronto Raptors selecting Cason Wallace. This has been a rumor in previous days, and Fred VanVleet's a free agent. There's a chance the Raptors could lose him. Cason Wallace would be his replacement and start right away in that scenario, but even if they bring Fred VanVleet back, Cason Wallace makes sense as a guy that can play a role and be a defensive stopper at a guard spot as a third guard behind VanVleet in the recently opted in Gary Trent Jr. At 14, the Portland Trailblazers, who traded down from 3 to 14 as part of the Zion Williamson-Scoot Henderson trade, take Derek Lively II, the center out of Duke. Yusuf Nurkic has gotten a lot of heat from Blazer fans, obviously, in the past couple of years or so. But a big problem has been Portland hasn't had a legitimate backup center behind him to take some of the responsibility off of him. I think they would get that here in Derek Lively, who had a great final 8-week stretch of the season at Duke and is a legitimate rim protector, rim runner, lob target, and should be solid enough to get minutes as a backup center. Based on those areas. He might have upside as a short role playmaker and a shooter, but that's just kind of the cherry on top if he can develop that. He's going to be drafted probably in the lottery due to the strengths that I listed before. At 15, the Atlanta Hawks select Jalen Hood-Schifino, the combo guard out of Indiana. And with Trae Young and DeJounte Murray, the Atlanta Hawks have a stacked backcourt, but they don't really have a legitimate third guard that they can trust, especially to create shots. And Hood-Schifino would make a lot of sense. And with Trae Young's defensive incapabilities, being able to run lineups out there with Hood-Schifino and DeJounte Murray could be interesting, as Hood-Schifino is a solid defensive piece, and Hood-Schifino could just guard the worst backcourt player in that scenario, with DeJounte Murray obviously guarding the best, as he's a really solid defender. So Hood-Schifino at 15 to Atlanta would make some sense in my opinion. At 16, I have the Dallas Mavericks, who traded down from 10 to 16 while getting DeAndre Ayton. They're going to take Olivier Maxence Prosper to hopefully be their future Dorian Finney-Smith. Some really long names here, some hyphenated names here, but I think Maxence Prosper could fill a role like Finney-Smith did. Finney-Smith was not a good shooter in college, was undrafted because of it, always had defensive potential, developed his three-point shot enough to be a legitimate 3-and-D role player that really did well in Dallas. Of course, Dallas traded him away for Kyrie Irving. I think they could be looking to fill that sort of role with a player like Olivier Maxence Prosper, who has risen up draft boards considerably and had a good draft combine, measured in well, and recently got invited to the green room, which suggests that he is going to be taken in the first round. At 17, we have a trade, as the Detroit Pistons have acquired this pick. They did so by trading Bojan Bogdanovic to the Lakers for Malik Beasley and this first round pick. Now, I think Bogdanovic might have a little bit more value than this, but there's a player on the board that I like for the Pistons here at 17, and that is Jordan Hawkins, the shooting guard out of UConn. With all the playmaking that Detroit has, and they short up their front court with the Jarris Walker pick at 5, having a guy that can come off screens and shoot on the move, but is also a really good catch and shoot guy and can be a floor spacer for both Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. I really like Jordan Hawkins' fit here at 17, and I like Detroit trading Bogdanovic to get a similar caliber shooter, in my opinion, but at a guard spot that will be much cheaper the next 4 years. And Malik Beasley isn't really valued here for Detroit in this trade, but they could potentially waive and stretch him as part of this in order to maximize cap space, as I think Detroit might try and go after a couple of guys. Not sure who, but I think they'll try and make a play in free agency. I think Rui Hachimura could be one of those guys as well. So maybe Detroit could be big-brained here, trading Bogdanovic to the Lakers, making them think, oh, we don't need Rui Hachimura as much anymore, and then the Pistons try and go after him to be a scoring power forward there in a two-man duo at that position with Jarris Walker. I don't know. That could be interesting. And at 18, the Atlanta Hawks traded for this pick from the Miami Heat. And in this trade, the Hawks finally get rid of John Collins and get back Duncan Robinson, Jovic, and this 18th pick. For the Heat, they're probably waiting on Damian Lillard potentially becoming available, but if that doesn't happen on draft night, it might make sense for the Heat to just trade the 18th pick for somebody that can make them a little bit better. The Heat have had a hole at the starting power forward spot. Kevin Love started some playoff games at that power forward spot, and while John Collins has fallen off the past couple of years, he's probably not a good contract now. He does make sense for the Heat and could be a solid floor spacing, rim running, lob catching big man for Miami, whose defensive issues are kind of masked there with the defensive pieces that the Heat have. And Duncan Robinson's a bad contract too, so those two guys, questionable contracts, kind of cancel out. John Collins being the better player, Miami has to give up some value for him. Jovic is an intriguing young piece, and the 18th pick is included as well. And with the 18th overall pick, the Atlanta Hawks select Leonard Miller out of the G League Ignite, a power forward who I'm high on, really like his upside as a skill guy offensively and a versatile defender on the defensive side of the ball, a guy that can handle, pass, and could develop as a three-point shooter and can rebound the hell out of the ball as well. Leonard Miller will make some sense for Atlanta after they trade John Collins. At 19, the Golden State Warriors select Brandon Podziemski, the combo guard out of Santa Clara, who is rumored to be going top 20. It'll be interesting to see the landing spot. I would assume it's Golden State, who could view him as a backup guard option, solid playmaker, smart player, crafty guy. Could make sense there for Golden State at 19. At 20, the Houston Rockets select Noah Clowney, the big man out of Alabama. The Rockets could go for some big man depth. Getting a guy who could play potentially both the 4 and the 5 spots would make sense because the Rockets have Jabari Smith Jr. and Alperen Şengün kind of entrenched there in those spots. So getting a guy that could play next to either guy and help the Rockets defensively would make some sense. Now on to 21, the Oklahoma City Thunder traded down for these picks, and with the first one, they're going to select Nick Smith Jr., who's a combo guard from Arkansas, who was a great high school player, but dealt with some injury issues his freshman season, and could be a high upside pick if his struggles in college are maybe due to those injury issues, or if his natural talent can win out because he can really score the ball, has a great feel for it, and just didn't really do great at that at Arkansas. And getting a guy who can maybe play both the point and the shooting guard positions to pair next to SGA long-term could make some sense. At 22, the Thunder take Ryan Rupert, who could be a stash option, but is just one of those long-armed, international, defensive-minded players that the Thunder seem to like. They took one of them last year in Ousmane Dieng. I could see them taking another one here in Ryan Rupert. Of course, if they stay at 12, that could be Bilal Coulibaly as well. Rupert fits the Thunder archetype. At 23, the Blazers select James Nagy, an international big man who could be a stash option for the Blazers here at 23, but given the lack of center depth, the Blazers in this draft get Derek Lively and James Nagy and really shore up that position long term, and are just hopeful that one of those guys could develop into the long-term starting center to replace Yusuf Nurkic eventually. At 24, the Sacramento Kings select Andre Jackson Jr., the wing out of UConn, who's a guy that I really like as a defensive piece, as a guy who can pass the ball, as an athlete, as somebody who rebounds. I think he'd fit really well in Sacramento because Jackson's really good in transition, especially pushing the ball, but also as a cutter. And with all the shooting that they have there in Sacramento now, having Andre Jackson off that bench lineup who can come in, maybe defend the best perimeter player on an opposing team, and then can really ratchet up the pace, maybe even more than Sacramento already plays at. I just love Andre Jackson Jr. to Sacramento as a system fit. At 25, the Memphis Grizzlies select Kobe Jones, who just screams Memphis Grizzly to me as just kind of an all-around multi-year college guy. The Grizzlies seem to like those types of guys. In last year's draft, took both Jake LaRavia and David Roddy, who kind of fit that mold, and Colby Jones being a guy who can maybe play point guard in a pinch and maybe help the Grizzlies withstand the 25-game suspension to Ja Morant. But then when Ja Morant and Tyus Jones are there, can play the two, maybe some small ball three, and just fit as a shooter and a guy who will make the right decision, has a good float game. I like Kobe Jones to Memphis. With the 26th pick, the Indiana Pacers select Bryce Sensabaugh, who is a phenomenal scorer at Ohio State, has a lot of upside as a three-level scorer. Defensively is a major question, and there are some concerns that the way he scored in college won't really translate to the NBA. He used his body a ton, created a lot of space with that in the NBA against bigger, stronger, quicker players. It'll be interesting to see if Sensabaugh can score much in the same way. At 27, the Charlotte Hornets select Dariq Whitehead, the wing out of Duke, who has dealt with injury issues the past couple of years, foot problems that have kind of zapped his athleticism. He was a much higher regarded high school prospect back when he was a little bit more athletic and could do a little bit more off the dribble, but he was still able to play a role for Duke as a knockdown three-point shooter, above 40% from behind the arc, and defensively could be okay. It just remains to be seen with his foot issues if he'll be able to be more the guy he was in high school or more the guy that he was at Duke. At 28, the Washington Wizards, who got this pick in that Ayton, Mavs, Suns, Jazz trade, they're going to select Keontae George, the guard out of Baylor. This is just an upside pick, potentially the long-term Bradley Beal replacement if the Wizards are lucky. I think Keontae George is going to slide on draft night, but potentially be a really good upside pick in the last part of the first round, maybe even the early second if he slides that far. And for a team in Washington with multiple picks in the draft, it could make a lot of sense. At 29, the Denver Nuggets recently traded for this pick. They're going to take Jet Howard, who also could fall down draft boards into the latter part of the first round, the latter part of the 20s here, going 29 to Denver. He makes a ton of sense just as a big wing shooter who could just slot into Michael Porter Jr.'s role when MPJ is off the floor and knock down a lot of the same shots. I really like Jet Howard as a floor spacing shooter here at 29 to Denver, who is loading up on draft picks. And at 30, this pick was supposed to be the Wizards as part of the Porzingis trade, but that has fallen apart like right before I record this video. So the pick here is Gigi Jackson. Maybe it's the Clippers, or maybe the Clippers do something else. I don't know who's going to be the pick here, but Gigi Jackson would have made sense for the Wizards, just swinging for some more upside with Keontae George. They took Anthony Black at 8. Gigi Jackson could make some sense here, but I don't know whose pick this is going to be. Here we can take a look at the second round. I think Chris Murray will probably go in the first, but I'm not super high on him. And with a lot of the guys that already kind of fell, I had to have him here at 31 to Detroit. At 32, Jackson Davis from Indiana makes some sense for the Denver Nuggets, as I think he could play next to Nikola Jokic, and Nikola Jokic could bring out the best of him, and I think Denver needs some big man depth. Jordan Walsh as a defensive piece that Charlotte needs at 34. Maxwell Lewis, upside guy at 35 to Boston. Marcus Sasser, potentially the long-term starting point guard in Orlando. Orlando has a lot of point guards, but none of them are truly entrenched there. They could be potentially shopping some of those guys, so I could see them going with a point guard with their third pick of the draft. Sidi Sissoko seems to be falling down boards. I think this is probably too low for him, but for Denver, I think that would be a great get. I think this would be a phenomenal draft for the Nuggets. At 38, Kobe Brown, a role-playing stretch four that can play behind Keegan Murray would make some sense. His shooting development in his last year at Missouri was good. Tristan Vukcevic, a stash guy, big man, 39 to Charlotte. Durisic, a stash wing to the Pacers with their third of 4 picks. Muhammad Gee, some more front court depth at 41 to Charlotte. Amari Bailey, another point guard there for the Wizards. More of a natural point than Anthony Black is, though. At 43, the Blazers take, no, that's not Keon Johnson. That's Keontae Johnson. No relation there, of course. The wing out of Kansas State. I recently dropped a prospect watch video, so if you want some more of my thoughts on him, check out that video. Ben Shepherd at 44 feels like a Spurs type player. Seth Lundy at 45 feels like a Grizzlies type player, and the Grizzlies need more perimeter shooting. The final 15, well, it's actually 13 picks of the draft because 2 of them were forfeited. Colin Castleton has been rising up boards as a skilled big man who can pass, handle a little bit, and play some defense. Julian Phillips, 47 to the Lakers as a hopefully 3-and-D guy if his three-point shot can improve. Julian Strother is a steal there at 48. I have a borderline first-round grade on him, but I feel like he might fall due to his age and lack of defensive ability and ability to put pressure on the rim. But just as a small forward that can come in, knock down threes, and hit floaters when run off the line would be a really good get at 48 for the Clippers. Vincent Valerio Bodon out of Hungary is a 6'10 dude who can really shoot the ball, quick trigger, intriguing guy. He's one of the older guys in this draft, but also kind of a project upside type pick as well. But for Cleveland, who could use some size and front court depth and shooting, in my opinion, in those spots, he would be a guy to take a chance on. Kamara at 50 to OKC. Sanogo 51 to Brooklyn, giving them more big depth. Jalen Wilson 52. I'm not super high on him, but I think the Suns would view him as a guy that could come in and maybe eat some minutes up right away. He wouldn't need to as much after the Ayton trade in this mock draft, but would be a guy that I think Frank Vogel could potentially trust, being a 4-year college player who showed that he can play a role on a team that won the national championship in his junior season. Jalen Clark, 53, kind of becomes the new Josh Okogie in Minnesota. 54, Terquavion Smith could be their Malik Monk long-term. 55, another stash pick for the Pacers. Another stash pick there at 56 for the Grizzlies. A stash pick at 59 with the Wizards having multiple first-round picks. And then Imani Bates goes 60. That could be an intriguing spot for him in Milwaukee, just taking a chance on some of his tough shot-making ability. With that being said, that's a wrap for this mock draft. Let me know what you think of these trades and these picks down in the comment section below. And once again, thank you to Manta Mask for sponsoring this video. Check out the link in the description box below. Promo code Uprise for 10% off. Also, stay tuned for all that content that I said I had planned at the start of this video. I'm looking forward to that. With that being said, I'm out of here. I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.